So welcome everyone to this AM&P Network session. This is Signature Live, where we dive beyond the pages of Signature magazine to explore a recent cover story. Today we are welcoming Kaylen Tucker, Campos Seijo, Mia Ricci as our panelists, and also we have Carla Caloridis as she is pinch hitting today for our colleague Thomas Marcetti. And so I'm going to let everyone introduce themselves here in just a minute. I have a couple of opening remarks that I want to, and housekeeping pieces that I want to get through. And so I want to welcome everyone here, especially those of you who may be new to AM&P Network. Maybe you were a member previously, maybe you saw us or this session on social media recently. Whatever the case, we are glad that you're here, and especially glad that you're here for this conversation. If you're not a current member, now is a really great time to consider that, because we have a discount running through the end of November on membership. You'll get a discount on membership, and then you can take advantage of some of the early bird member pricing on things like Excel Awards that open next week, the Neals that are open now. Amplify BIMS is open with early bird pricing, and then the Amplify Content and Marketing Summit is about to launch with a very deep ultra early bird discount. So now is a very good time to take advantage of the savings. A couple of notes before we begin. We follow a code of conduct in all of our spaces. We have a strong DEI statement. Also a reminder of our antitrust statement. It's important to avoid conversations or discussion of sensitive topics like pricing or cost information. We are a CAE approved provider, and so if you're looking to earn credits, today is a good day to do that. There's a couple of things coming up on our calendar for the rest of the month and into the winter time. Tomorrow we're doing our monthly Slack chat. It is at noon tomorrow instead of the typical early morning 8:30 a.m. on Eastern time. We are covering the same conversation and the same topics that we're covering today. So it's a really great way to come back and join us for a little bit of an extended conversation around that. We have a couple of other events happening in November and early December. And then our BIMS event is happening in February in Orlando. That is high-level strategic learning and networking. So this session is set up as a meeting, so you can participate in a roundtable style discussion. First, we'll have a short conversation among our panelists, and then we'll open it up to a larger discussion where you can ask questions, you can be part of the dialogue. For that portion, please use the raised hand feature that you'll find in your Zoom settings. We also have the captions enabled, and so to see those, you can go to Show Captions and then click on View Full Transcript. And so with that, I will invite Carla to kick us off today. Hi, Carla.
Hi, everybody. It's so wonderful to see so many faces on this very important topic. As Jen mentioned, I am pinch hitting for Thomas Marcetti, who desperately wanted to be here today. He's just not feeling well enough to do it. So we're recording this so Thomas can go back and let me know how I did. As Jen said, Signature Live is just an opportunity for us to all get together and continue the conversations that we start in Signature's cover stories. So it's kind of a way to talk about what that next 1,000 words of the article might have been, or what other questions the article could have or should have addressed. So to that end, we have 3 fantastic panelists with us today, and they're going to bring us some additional insight, experience, and new voices to the conversation, which new voices is the topic. We're going to be talking about bringing new voices into our publications, our content, and our communications. And specifically, we're going to be talking about bringing historically underrepresented and marginalized voices into our work. It's a very hefty topic, but I know this is going to be a great conversation with a lot of openness and transparency and honesty and support for one another. Kaylen, why don't you start with I'm going to ask each speaker to just briefly introduce themselves, and then I've got some questions for them. And you guys in the audience, feel free to raise your hand and ask questions, and Jen will help me make sure that I don't miss anybody. So to start, Kaylen, can you let us know who you are and, a sentence or two about what you do and how you'd like to be referred to.
Thank you, Carla. I'm Kaylen Tucker, and I'm a long-term AMNP network member. So I'm happy to see all these familiar faces and some new faces or names that I see popping up. I work in the education sector at the National Association of Elementary School Principals, where I serve as the Associate Executive Director for Communications. A lot of words, but basically I'm the editor-in-chief for the association, and you can refer to me as Kaylen.
Wonderful, thank you. All right, Bibiana?
Hello, thank you for the introduction. My name is Bibiana Campos Seijo, and I'm the editor-in-chief of Chemical and Engineering News, which is the news organization of the American Chemical Society, which is one of the largest scientific societies in the world. And we're based in Washington, D.C. And I would like to be referred as Bibi, please.
Okay, thank you, Bibi. All right, and Mia.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Carla. Let me just get oh, here you are. I lost the screen already, so that's not starting well. My name is Mia Ricci. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the Director of Publication Operations for AGU Scientific Journals. AGU is the American Geophysical Union. We have about 23 journals and based in DC. I'm a Chinese Indonesian woman in my 40s with brown hair. I'm wearing a red and purple sweater. I'm joining you from my home office in Bloomington, Indiana, and I'm recognizing that the Miami, Delaware, Potawatomi, and Shawnee people as past, present, and future caretakers of this land. I am so happy to be a part of this conversation, and you can call me Mia.
Wonderful, thank you. Thank you, all three. Okay, I want to mention one thing, because we are obviously trying to be very, very inclusive. If you want to ask a question, but you really don't want to be on camera, please don't let that stop you. It's perfectly fine. You don't have to be on camera. If you prefer to put the question in the chat, we can find you there as well. So just feel comfortable engaging in whatever way you want to. All right, so with that, we're going to dive right in. One of the key themes of this article was that bringing new underrepresented voices into our content is really about much more than just having a couple of people from marginalized communities in our magazine. It's more than a checklist and hopefully more than just a one-off action, right? So to start off with, I want to ask our panelists, what are some ways that we can gauge, how can we tell if our efforts are really creating and encouraging inclusion and equity? What's a way to sort of self-check our progress in this area? And I will just, I don't know if I want to pick on somebody or just let you guys, is there anybody among you that wants to start? Okay, then Kaylen, raised her hand, I saw it. All right, go ahead, Kaylen.
I'll start because the word checklist resonated with me. I know that, we try not to think about it as a checklist, but I certainly think that's a way where you can start. Is you've got, a big production cycle that has to do with editorial and design and mail and all of that. And so all of those things are on a production schedule and on a checklist. And so, I think that when I first started trying to make sure that the magazine that I edit really intentionally endeavored to make sure that we were representing diverse voices, I did kind of think of it as a checklist of, okay, here are the people the topics that I want to address, and then also just the things that I already had on a checklist in terms of the number of articles that I'm looking for, the types of content that I'm looking for. And then I just started to add that in as well, just wanting to make sure that, I wasn't tapping the same people all the time, but really thinking about who else needs to be a part of this conversation and who's been left out. So I would say actually starting with the checklist mentality isn't a terrible way to start.
Okay, fantastic. Mia, how can we gauge our success? A checklist is great. That I mean, I think Kaylen has just told us that we don't have to feel bad about that, right? What are some other ways that we can gauge, our progress?
Yeah, I agree with Kaylen. I think, a checklist is not necessarily a bad thing, and I think it could be helpful for a lot of people. So for me, looking after scientific journals, we have a huge kind of network of stakeholders, right? Editors, reviewers, authors. So ongoing data collection is so important. I think this is something that's been kind of an oversight in the scholarly publishing community. It's not perfect, but different organizations are starting to collect data on this. So at AGU, we do it. And, we've been collecting data, demographic data, for our membership for many years, but we have expanded that in recent years to include non-members. So that expanded it to authors, editors, reviewers. And it's great to have the data because not only you get to see it and you could, kind of see it, year after year to see progress, but for us connecting it with our member database means you get also a comparison to see kind of the wider community, how kind of we sit, right? And we're also working with other publishers. So we're part of this collective called the Joint Commitment. And this has 56 organizational members. Many of them are association publishers, representing about 15,000 journals. So this is also a way to look at wider, where are the benchmarks and where are your progress is. But so all that stuff is great. I think data is important when you can have it. But to me, the hard part is to, you can't tell from the numbers whether people truly feel like they're in an inclusive or equitable environment. So you can see from the data, you have like X many more percent or number of people from certain underrepresented communities, year on year. But how do you know if they're truly feeling included, right? So I've learned to look for social, visual, verbal cues, when interacting with them. Like, are those editors or staff members, are they participating? When they're in meetings, do they feel comfortable to lend their voice in their discussions? Do the leaders or the editors ask for their input? Are they comfortable presenting dissenting opinions? And when they do, how do the group react? And for my staff, editorial staff, is there active engagement between junior editor, junior staff member, or with the senior staff members, right? Like, are they being credited, named, and recognized for everything that they do? And so I think things like this help to see whether the efforts are paying off, or help for me to identify things that we need to work on. So aside from the numbers, the data numbers, the initiatives, the financial investments on this DEI efforts, I think that recognizing the feel, like they're the vibes is also equally important.
Okay, thank you. Bibi, anything to add to that? I'm curious, do you collect data outside your members? I think that's a wonderful idea to make sure that we don't just focus on the people who are members, but focus on everyone that we're engaging.
Yeah, and actually we do have checklists as well. So certainly for the editorial team and for the creative team, they have checklists as they create pieces of content or imagery to go with that content. They have checklists that have inclusivity or diversity and accessibility as part of that, to make sure that we are kind of like in the clear in terms of what we want to do. So they certainly work. The other thing that we have done for some time is we have a diversity tracker for our sources. So, and this started because a member of the chemical sciences community many years ago, she had one of her graduate students looking at our coverage over 6 months of the kind of like the small news items that we publish in the magazine, and they were actually looking at the diversity of the people that we interviewed, and actually it wasn't very good. So she wrote us a very nice letter where she told us about this study that she conducted with her student, and it was embarrassing because, you know, we were not really paying a lot of attention to diversity there. But now that became our benchmark in terms of, you know, the number that she gave us. That's the minimum that we have to do. So, you know, we have to climb that mountain now. And then, of course, we developed the diversity source tracker that now allows us to look at the diversity of sources. So, you know, those benchmarks have improved significantly, but and not only in gender, which was her intention originally, but also in terms of regional diversity, for example, as well. So, you know, from that perspective, we have been very deliberate about the, you know, checklists, the process and the thought process for editors and, you know, creative people and those kinds of things, but also in terms of, you know, having benchmarks that allow us to measure our progress. I think that impact is still difficult to measure beyond, you know, those numbers and the inclusivity that Mia was talking about. But I think that one thing that is really good is when you call them to interview them for a story and they're not surprised that you call them, because, you know, there's an expectation that, you know, we would go to somebody like them to be part of that story. And I think that that's really, really nice, because it means that they understand that we're sourcing the best possible candidates and you know, paying attention to the diversity in the chemical sciences. So that's really good, but anecdotal.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, I'm going to go on to another question, and just folks, again, if there's something that you want to, I know some folks are in the chat, that's fantastic. If you want to ask a question, you don't have to wait for any special time. Just throw your hand up, your virtual hand up, or your literal hand, either way. Okay, so you know, a big part of getting new voices and new people into our projects is finding them, right? Sometimes we're challenged to find them. We know they're out there, but we have to do the legwork. And so doing this means at some point, you're probably going to find yourself on Google or LinkedIn or something else, trying to see if that person that you're trying to reach out to is part of an underrepresented community. And, you know, that can make us feel a little uncomfortable, you know, that we go about it that way, kind of vetting the person visually or any other way on screen before we contact them. So panelists, how do you deal with that uncomfortable feeling? And is there a better way to do this? And is there anyone that wants to start off?
Carla, okay. I think Ruth has a question. Ruth, are you raising your hand? Yeah.
All right, Ruth.
Not so much a question, and some of you may be planning to mention this, but there are dozens and dozens of associations that are varieties of the ones that may be considered standard or major, that are for various different communities, ethnicities, genders, etc. Almost every so-called major association has a subset or a companion association. We can look at our association community as a whole, and we can often find sources for new voices that way. So not just the American Medical Association, but the National Medical Association, whose members are people of color, or the Women's Law Group. There are several women's lawyers associations. Anything like that, Asian American, Pacific, et cetera, any group that you can think of as a starting point, including your own, probably has at least one, we could almost call them mirror group, that consists of people who are not the standard majority sources. And I've been kind of preaching this for a while now, that our association community is a fantastic starting point to find those new voices. And then you can go and look them up in Google or LinkedIn or whatever, but at least you've got a starting point of knowing who some of these useful voices might be.
Yeah,
and how to find them.
That's a fantastic point, Ruth, and thanks for bringing that up. That's great. Panelists, do you have anything to add to that about ways to find these diverse voices?
reiterating what Ruth was saying. So for example, I work for ACS, American Chemical Society, but for things like, for activities like Trailblazers, which is an editorial activity that we have been doing for 3 years, which is designed to highlight the diversity of the chemical sciences. We've worked with the National Organization of Black Chemists and Chemical Engineers when the focus was Black excellence in the chemical sciences, and they've been, really helpful in terms of connecting us with leaders and established scientists, but also we wanted to have them interviewed by some of the younger members of the community to almost kind of like have a mentor to mentee kind of conversation, but also giving the younger members of the community a voice and an opportunity to talk a little bit about their experiences. And in some cases, it became a bit of a dialogue in the stories. And in No Voce, which is how we refer to this organization, were incredibly helpful in terms of highlighting people, which then we paired up. It was fabulous. So I think that's a fantastic suggestion. The other one would be social media and being open about, saying, we really need some diverse voices for this story about X, and you can provide some detail. And then people put their hands up or recommend colleagues and that kind of thing. So that has been pretty fruitful as well.
Oh, great idea. Social media. Yes. Mia, Ruth talked about associations and, industries often having like a subset or a mirror association. But we also at AMP Network, we have associations of all sizes, and some of them are small and they serve a very small niche, and they don't have a subset that focuses on a marginalized group. What advice do you have for some of these smaller groups that maybe don't have the resources to them that the big groups have?
Yeah, I was going to mention that as well. I agree with what Bibi and Ruth has said, but there's literally an organization or an association for everything out there, which is great. And this is mentioned in the signature article, which, for example, like I didn't even realize there is the editor of database of diverse databases from editors of color. So this is what a great resource. I didn't know that. And I'm so grateful for people that has, graciously and generously, added their profile to it. So there's options to that. And yeah, so for me, I resonate a lot with this question because as an Asian person with a non-Asian last name, I could imagine people Googling me and be like, who is this Ricci person? She sounds Italian, and then to look me up. So I get the Googling and LinkedIn can feel a little uncomfortable. So yes, definitely looking at associations out there. At AGU, we have, because we're a large association, we have some community groups like that. But so I look for that depending on what I'm working on and what project, whether with an AGU or outside. I'm involved with the Asian American and Pacific Islander in geosciences group. There's things like that you could kind of look into, but there's also multi-organizational group that's growing within, for me at least, for scholarly publishing, like C4DIS is the Coalition for Diversity and Inclusion. So, aside from reaching out to like those specific institutions, joining some of these kind of groups that's not specific to your organization, you can bet also, if you look at anything, there's a DEI committee for everything. Like this is like a thing now, which is good and bad, I guess, but there is one. So, but that's a way for me. I've been, involved with some of them when I have the time, and that's a way for me to join the networks, because at the end of the day, sometimes, I rely on my network to help me identify these, these voices that I'm looking for when I don't have an idea. And so I'm joining this kind of committees and organizations to expand my network and of course learn more and put in the work. But through these kind of activities, I've built this relationship that's based on trust, right, and intention. So now I've gotten, in the last few years, I've gotten quite a group of like amazing people that I could email and ask these questions. I'm doing this panel, I'm doing this project, and I'm looking for someone to represent this community. Do you know anyone? And like, these are the kind of questions that you can ask somebody if you have that trust that's built. You're not just going to ask, to like a random Asian person that hey, do you know another Asian that you could, something like that. No, it's something that you build with trust underneath, and I see some of the people in my network in this meeting, which I'm super excited about. So I think, expanding that network and building the relationship, putting in the work, it's a journey. you'll over time, if you continue doing the work, you won't have problems finding people. I truly believe it because I'm seeing this for myself.
Okay, excellent. Kaylen, anything you want to add to this?
Yeah, I just love what you said about establishing trust first. Yeah, you definitely, that resonated a lot with me. So I just wanted to underscore that, and that it's okay to ask these questions. And I think that's part of going back to the first question that we were talking about in terms of how do you know, how do you measure? I think one of the ways that you can measure is, do people feel comfortable talking about equity and saying these words and asking these questions, that this is normal, that it's okay. So I just wanted to underscore that as well.
Okay.
If I can add, Carla, just
Go ahead, please
another
do.
thing. Another thing is like, I think it's really important when you're asking these kinds of questions is how you ask the question. I think, I gotten invites for panels and things like that, but, people that are receiving it, they will look at your email and read to see what your intentions are. So be very clear on what the project is, why you are asking this person, or why you are seeking to help. I think that is so important. So again, you don't want to just be a name on a panel. It has, like you said, I think one of you said that, when somebody, I think it was Bibi, like if you call somebody and then a surprise to hear from you, that's good. That means you have, kind of establish a position and your intention. So I think that's important with, putting out these kind of asks out there.
Okay, perfect. And Mia, your timing was perfect to add on to that because I have a dog barking behind me. So it was awesome. I could hit mute and you just took over. It was amazing. In full transparency, I'm just disclosing that. So anyways, all right, so let's move on. Panelists, if you're willing, can you share a moment, part of this gauging of making sure we're doing better means that you might have to step up and take some action. And action, sounds aggressive, but what I mean, you might have to speak up to, a colleague or reach out to a committee in your group that might be engaging, in some kind of problematic behavior or using some wording that might be not quite right. So would each of you share if you have an instance like this where you've had to kind of step up and say something and talk about how you said it and what kinds of help can we offer a colleague or a peer in that moment when situations like that come up?
I'm thinking of examples where some readers, members having, critical of DEI coverage because, right, for example, for us, because we cover a scientific discipline, they think that, this is something that is political, that it has nothing to do with science. But of course, most of us disagree with that view, right? And I think that is something that you need to handle sensitively as well, because, they might not agree with that story, but they will consume all the other content that you have, and they're members of your organization. So I think that you, in a way, you have to agree to disagree, and it can be just a simple, disagreement like that, and in some cases it can be pretty strongly worded, and we have seen that also. I mean, again, isolated cases, and I'm sure that pretty much everybody in this room has some stories to tell. But what has been helpful for us is that for our organization, diversity, equity, inclusion, and respect. So we refer to this as DEIR internally, not DEI, is a core value of the organization. And there is a statement on the website that we consistently refer to when there is, any kind of like comment or criticism like that. So, from that perspective, we will hear what they have to say, but we will say, this is something that is important for the organization, for the members of the organization, and here's the statement, and we will refer you to that. So, and that typically finishes the conversation. So that has been very useful, that as an organization, we have that really strong statement that we can use, and it helps settle those disputes or little arguments, if you want to call them that.
I have an anecdote that's very, I have to be very vulnerable with 29 folks on in this event space. But yeah, so I've had an experience where I was the problem. And so I was the person, I'd cultivated a relationship with, one of my academic crushes on Twitter, and she was a big name and this topic area that I wanted to publish in. And I got her to agree to write a piece after a year of developing this relationship. And I was just very excited to be able to share this new perspective and new voice with my organization's members. And she didn't like the editing that we did on her piece. And she actually ended up pulling her article from the magazine. And first of all, from a production standpoint, this is the worst thing that can happen at the last minute, to have this piece full. Now I've got a hole in the book. But also just as a person who, considers herself a champion of diversity and equity, and, I'm not just checking off a box on a list, like this is who I am and a part of my values. It was just a real wake-up call that, we all have to be humble and then also have grace, not just for other people, but for ourselves. So, we might make some mistakes, and you think about, okay, if you were the person making that big mistake, how would you want someone to communicate with you about it? Like, just think about yourself as the audience of that. So that's what I had to offer on that one.
Yeah. That's so. I just have a follow-up question on that, just for my own clarity. When you say mistake, so you made some edits that the author didn't agree with. So what was the mistake?
Well, the mistake is more on the process. And so what I took away was that I need to be more focused on, this editorial process. And so with a small team, and we work with a lot of outside editors, and, I just need to be more involved and more engaged. And I also just need to think about the type of editing that we do. I consider myself to be a very heavy-handed editor. And I thought that, I always thought that was good. But thinking about what it means for a particular voice, maybe I need to loosen up my perspective on personal voice in its place, and have more of a relationship with the writer. So after that it doesn't end just after I've courted this person and I've gotten them to write for the magazine, and then I pass them off to work with someone else in the editing and fine tuning. So just thinking about all of those, I consider those maybe mistakes is too harsh, but definitely room for thought. If a person didn't feel comfortable and wanted to pull their article, then that means that something went wrong.
Sure. Okay. Thanks. I appreciate that follow up. Mia, what about you? Any anecdotes?
No, I don't have any anecdotes at all. No, I'm just kidding. So many. I'm willing to be vulnerable as well. I mean, the question is about, one of those moments that you decided you want to take up and take some action. And this reminds me of the part of the signature article, I think at the end, what Sally Kim said, that it took her many years to recognize the power of her own voice to create change. And I felt this like in my core. There were so many moments starting from very early in my career, 15 years ago, I was 5 when I started working, where I felt, microaggressions or worse, and I felt like someone should do something about this, but not thinking of myself, and not realizing that I can be that someone. So, but I think like many people that I know, I think the recent climate shift in the last few years have forced me really, whether I was ready or not, into some kind of awakening, and which was both a traumatic and empowering experience. But there was a journal article that was published by Wiley, the company that I used to work at the time, wonderful company, a journal article that has racist and sexist tones in it. It should not have been published, and this was called out very publicly. Some of you in this event probably knows this, but specifically the article was offensive to women and Chinese scientists. As a Chinese woman working in scientific publishing, this infuriated me. And I felt like we had to do something. So I wanted to take action, but I was, again, not sure what to do. And I was terrified. And, and the first thing I did was looking at my network and talking to my manager. I think it's so important that taking action means that there's many different ways. And the main thing is like, you should feel comfortable to do it. You shouldn't be forced to do it, and having support. So I had a discussion with my team, and my team had a conversation about this. And I asked my manager, I was like, what if I post this on the company channel, about what we feel about the situation and what we hope our company would do. So I get support from many people, and I talk to people on the side. If I put this, can you please like it, press the like button and comment so I don't, feel like lonely. And so I did post it, and it went viral across the company. Well, they have 9,000 employees, and it went viral. And this led to the creation of the first Wiley Research DEI Council, which I co-led. And then I ended up launching the Wiley's first Asian and Pacific Islander employee resource group, because I also needed that community of support, and other people needed it. So I think, there are people around that wants to support you and lend their voice, and I think you can find them. But there shouldn't be a pressure to take action. Everybody should take action, but there's many ways, and you do it when you're ready, especially if you are part of a historically excluded community, because there's the emotional, kind of tax that comes with it.
Yeah, wonderful. All right, so the power of one voice, I think. All right, so here's a question for you. All of you on this panel we know you've been interviewed, because I've interviewed you, or someone in my team has, and we know you've taken part in conferences as speakers and so forth. What are some of the sort of red flags that you see, that you notice if a group reaches out to you to be part of an event or an article? Are there any red flags that kind of make you stop and wonder, do I want to do this or not, from the standpoint of DEI? Kaylen, you nodding your head.
I was nodding my head. I don't know. I go back to the conversation we had earlier, where it just feels like you're checking a box. So, for example, if in the introduction or in the beginning of the conversation, the person is talking about, oh, we want you to represent the equity voice, or something like that. That just feels, or if you are not an expert in the topic that they're seeking, but why are you asking me to, to speak on this topic when I'll speak on it, but but certainly there are other people who have proven that they're an expert in this. So I guess those are two things.
Yeah, that's a great point. That second point. Bibi, what about you? What are some of the red flags for you that make you think maybe I shouldn't participate?
I think I've not ever, I don't think, had a situation like that, but things that would worry me would be certainly if I am the only woman, for example. I think that would be certainly something that I think, for most of us these days is unacceptable. Certainly if it was, all men panel, but even, being the only woman, if it is like 4 or 5 speakers, I think that would be something that perhaps is not ideal either. But, I don't know, maybe I'm too oblivious, right? Because also, I don't know, I think that for me being a woman, but also I've lived most of my life away from my country of birth, so I'm kind of like also I think that there's some intersectionality there, that I have a funny accent, speak a different language, and that kind of thing. But I don't think I've ever encountered anything like this that has worried me. Yeah.
Okay, Mia, anything to add to that?
Oh yeah, lots of things. No, I'm kidding. I just have lots to say today. No, but I look at the wording of the invite. I think I mentioned before when, that email thing, right? When you're asking somebody to find a voice, it's, I look at the wording. If the invite doesn't specify why I'm being asked, really, like, what is it about me? Then it feels very much like a checklist thing. Are you asking me because I know a lot about publishing and this and specific DEI efforts? Or is it just because you Googled my name and you see that I'm Asian, and I work in publishing? So I look at the invite, whether it's clear, the intention is clear. I check out who else is in the panel. So like Bibi said, if the panel is all men, I don't agree. I don't say yes, typically. I also have a personal stance. If it's a panel on diversity, equity, and inclusion, I would not want to be the only, minority voice in the panel. I mean, if that's the topic, it shouldn't be that way, I think. And I check out the organization who's doing it. And I think this is also important. If you are, it's a work event, it's a professional capacity, and you're representing a company, then I will be looking at, doing a little bit of research of what your company stands for. So when I get a request, I look at all of this. Luckily, it's been very few where I've seen some of these red flags, but that's usually what I look at.
I think that's a good point, because I think the organizations as well, it can be a performative thing as well, right? Where, as an organization, we talk about diversity. Yeah, sure. But, you're doing zero about it, right? And I think that would be another thing to look for. Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree, Bibi. And I think the other thing is, like I mentioned this before, is that there's this minority tax, or this community voice. Like I think a lot of the work in DEI is being led and driven by people from historically excluded communities. So these people are, they're being asked again and again on, to represent, the work, but also there's like this always, for me at least, I'm always like struggling the balance of being that issue. Is like, I don't want to represent all Asian people, like that's not, it's tough to do that. So I think that's something that I look at when I'm being asked to participate in the project. What is my role here? Am I going to be the one who has to speak for, all Asians or all women, like that kind of stuff. So, yeah.
So I think what we're saying, because this is a little bit of a slippery slope, right? If you're really trying to bring diverse voices in, and that is something on your proverbial checklist, right? It's still, if I'm capturing what you've said well, it still has to be authentic. It still has to be authentic. It can't just be because you're a woman or a person of color or something else. It has to be that there is an authentic reason, so that you as an individual don't feel like you're being put on display or checking off a list box for someone. Is that a good way of putting it? That the ask needs to be authentic. Okay. All right. Terrific. All right. I've got another question here. Am I missing any hands, Jen? Or am I doing okay?
I don't see any hands, but I would also just, invite anyone who has a question or wants to contribute. We're happy to have you, pop on camera if you want to, raise a hand. The chat is also lively, and thank you for that. And so we'll just give a second to see if there's anyone out there. Hi, Mark.
Hello. So I have a question, probably better in voice rather than writing. I was curious how you weigh a request for perhaps a sincere invitation to someone, whether it is the month of, recognition, if an organization wants to include those voices, and and the invitations declined, or just in general? I mean, how do you judge, or what can organizations do to be more sincere, or if there's a sincere request, that kind of thing? I guess it's kind of an obscure question, a little awkward, but I was curious what everybody thinks of that.
Who wants to answer that question?
I like the question because it's the reality, right? So we want to have organizations want to use recognition months to highlight those represented in that month. So, it's a slippery slope, catch-22, all of those things. And I think that the answer is that you just have to keep trying. And so in the example that I gave of the person who pulled her article, so, I didn't stop trying to get coverage of that topic. I just, we thought, who I was asking and why and how. So I think that it goes back to the, the longevity and the commitment to this, that it has to be there. So maybe it means that, like Mia was saying earlier, you need to work on, building relationships and building up that level of trust. But I do think it's complicated. So I think it's a great question.
Anyone else want to jump in on that?
One thing that I would say is that is a very difficult thing to do well. I think sometimes people may come to you because of a recommendation, for example, by somebody else, so they might not know you directly, but perhaps the person that is in the middle is somebody that you appreciate, and that obviously is a connection of yours. But it's worth doing the research. And I'll give you a personal example where somebody was kind of like recommending me as somebody from the Latin community, to participate. And I do speak Spanish, but I come from Spain, so I'm theoretically not Latina. And for a lot of South American people, my country is a colonialist country, so it would have really not gone down very well, right? So I think it was all, done with the best intentions, but there was a risk there that because I really didn't know that person firsthand. It was through a third party. It could have, been a little bit risky, but yeah. Anyways, that's very, very specific to me. But in general, I think that it's always nice when somebody wants you to express your opinions. I would welcome any kind of approach by an organization, unless there's an issue with the organization per se, as we were talking about earlier. But otherwise, it's always taken as intended, which I think is good spirit.
Okay, thank you. We've got about 10 minutes left. I do have another couple questions, but I want
to comment on that one, Carla.
Yeah,
okay.
Please.
Yeah, I think that is a great question, Mark. And yeah, kind of awkward, but yeah, real. It's real, right? This is what we all kind of deal with. And I see in the chat, Demetra and Michelle, I think tokenization is a real thing and is a big problem. And I completely understand why some people have to be very careful about this. And again, I think it's that journey. If you have positioned your organization as one that has provided constant support and active work throughout the year, then if it's in May and Asian American Month, whatever, you come to me, and I will be probably more likely to say yes to, participating in your efforts, because I see that it's real. The intention is real. It's not a one-time, trendy month kind of situation. So it builds over years, right? And the other thing is that I think in our industry also there's a lot of things that you can do on those kind of months, right? Because that's not necessarily a panel or you're asking somebody to talk to. You could highlight articles that's been published before. You could do a feature on historical women or whatever groups. And also, here's the thing, you could also, there's other ways like making donations, charities, and things like that, things that maybe not I think that you will get clicks for or things like that, but that's also something. So there's various ways I think that you could support different kinds of groups throughout the year. But what a great question, because I struggle with it too. You know, and with the Asian, you know, and Pacific Islander community, I think we have struggled with, one of the main struggles is feeling historically invisible. You know, like being just silent, you know, and just not being seen, right? So when these heritage months come along, I want to be out there and like talking about it and like, you know, taking, because I feel like that's so important for myself and for my community. But again, I also don't want to be tokenized. So it's a great question. Thank you for sharing that.
And if I can add something, I mean, what I was just thinking is that I think all these DEIR or DEI efforts, it's all about being consistent and persistent. So I think you have to do it every time, all of the time, and you know, and then that's when you have a credibility as a person and credibility as an organization. And I think that is something that you know, a lot of organizations and groups like us are thinking about. So yeah, it's just, you know, just the one month and the one, you know, one activity or one event or whatever, that's not going to cut it, because there's no credibility there, right? There's no real honesty, because you know, it's a one-off.
Yeah, excellent. So see, Mark, that was a great question and got us a lot of great comments. Thank you for asking that. Anyone else? Jen, anyone I'm missing before I go on to the next question? Good.
I don't see anyone. I think we have time for one more question.
Okay. All right. So we need to chart our progress in some way, right? We often hear that you really don't know how well you're doing with something if you don't measure it. And how do we demonstrate that, you know, how do we demonstrate that we're not just, you know, standing there congratulating ourselves about having one minority author in a magazine or on our panel? You know, how do we make sure that we demonstrate the value of our projects and the value of our organizations? Because it's important to tell the stories, but if the stories feel like we're doing it to leverage something or to call, you know, to call attention to ourselves and congratulate ourselves when it's not really authentic. So how can we tell our stories and not look like we're just trying to jump on a bandwagon or call attention to the effort in a way that might not be appropriate?
I think, I mean, my comment about being consistent and persistent, I think that is applicable here. So you have to do it all the time, every time. And I think that is, you know, that is what you have to do, because I think that measuring impact is so difficult, but also is long-term, right? I remember years ago, maybe it was 2018, attending a conference by the UCHEMS, the European Chemical Societies in Liverpool it was, and they were talking about how the percentage of professors, chemistry departments in the UK had improved over the last decade. Well, it had improved from 4% for women professors, from 4% to 9%. And I just sat there in a decade and I thought, are we supposed to be celebrating this? Right? And the thing is, right, in 10 years, that sounds like a lot of effort has been put in and we haven't taken out enough, right? It seems like really slow progress, but it is progress in the right direction. And, you know, and I think that it depends on the context and how you actually look at those measures of success, you know, very often with respect to time. You know, here we're talking about generational change and about, you know, changing people's minds. And I think that is not something that happens, you know, quickly or without resistance. So, you know, I think we really, you know, should hope to do, you know, leave a better place, certainly for our kids, you know, even if, you know, we might not benefit from some of the changes that we're hoping to achieve in our lifetime. But yeah, I think patience, but persistence and consistency, that's the trick for me.
Okay, thank you, Bibi. Mia, anything from you on that?
Oh, I'm in the Bibi fan club. I am with you 100%. Like that is, yeah, it's not overnight. If like true inclusion and equity is easy to do, like then we, you know, be done. It's all done. We won't be having this kind of conversation. So I think it is important to celebrate progress, no matter how small they are. You know, incremental progress is progress. And it's also important to, like, even you go from 4 to 9%, that means some people put in the work to put in that 5%. You know, like it's to celebrate the people that's like working together to achieve it. So I think celebrating it is important. But yes, you know, persistence, consistency is so key, that you don't have, this is just what we're going to do this year. It's a long term. How are you structurally going to change things and making sure that you do it? So to show the value, I think you need to communicate this. You know, I am a big fan of organizations. Like a lot of associations have been publishing reports, very detailed reports of their DEI efforts. And to me, this shows, you know, commitment and consistency, especially if in the reports, it's not all just like the wonderful achievements. You talk about where the gaps still are. And the other thing is, like, I made so many mistakes, you know, working in this, you know, I didn't, you know, but I wasn't born in Indonesia and at 5, I'm going to be a DEI professional when I grew up, you know. I didn't do that. So like, I'm learning as I go. So there's lots of mistakes. And I think it's important that we share our learnings and our challenges, you know. Not only it helps each other, but it also makes it authentic. You know, we talk a lot about trust and authenticity. See, I can't talk. You know, my English, I feel.
You know what you mean.
There you go. That word. Yeah, exactly. So I think part of it is to be transparent, you know. So I think that's how you demonstrate your value. Your really long-term commitment, your transparency and consistency. Yeah.
So if somebody comes to one of you on the panel and says, you know, I heard you on this panel and you were great, and you know, I'm going to be honest with you, we really have done a terrible job having Asian voices represented in our content, and you were amazing, Mia, would you be willing, you know, if they're just coming out and saying it, right? I mean, as long as there's an authentic reason for you to be part of that particular panel, that wouldn't offend you. You would be okay with someone being very honest that they are on the journey and they haven't reached where they want to be.
Yeah, I appreciate honesty, just generally, you know, I might not, it doesn't mean if I get that ask, I'm going to say yes or, you know, right away, just because you're being honest, but I appreciate it. And I think that's always a good way to go. Okay. Oh, there's a good question from Stephanie in the chat. Oh, but are we out of time?
Yeah, I want to give Kaylen a chance to respond if she does, and if not, if Jen, oh, we're down to 1 minute. All right.
We're down to 1 minute. Go ahead, Kaylen.
The final word.
Final word, I'll respond to Stephanie's question about the checklists. And I just think that there's levels to this and that we're all on a different journey. So I am on a lot of panels with organizations like BB's and Mia's that, you know, are much larger, bigger budgets, much different types of processes. And, you know, I just try to remind myself that, you know, we're all starting somewhere. And so we just keep going. So if that means that you need to have, I mean, I feel like at my organization, we still need to be having a checklist in terms of, are we having diverse speakers at every event? I mean, we're there. We need to make sure that we have that our events don't just have all white men speaking. So if you're there, you might need a checklist, but you might be asking yourself a different set of questions if you're at a different level. And so I'll end with that.
Okay. Panelists, thank you. Thank you so much. You just brought so much clarity and inspiration to this discussion. Thank you all of our attendees for your questions, for your chat. That's fabulous. I know this is being recorded, Jen. People can access it later. If you're attending today and you're not a member, join us. Join us. We need you. We need your voices and your you know, your perspectives. And anything else, Jen? You need to.
If you want to continue the conversation on our Slack channel tomorrow, it is at noon. We're having a second part of this conversation. It's at noon. Our Slack channel is text chatting only, no video, no audio. And so you do not need to be camera ready. You can BYO lunch and join us. And we will have another great conversation around this. I'm so thankful to all of you for being here. Kaylen, Bibi, Mia, thank you so much. Carla, thank you. I'm just really happy and you know, humbled and also proud that our community can be able to foster and support conversations like this.
Wonderful. Thank you, everybody. Have a good rest of your day.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.